The city of Los Angeles, with its dazzling lights and fast-paced rhythm, is a place where everyone has their own story. With the remarkable growth of the entertainment industry, it has become home to many famous stars. However, there is a hidden corner of the city where a small fast food restaurant stands away from the prominent streets. The place is nothing special, just plain white walls and a few plastic chairs lined up in rows. Despite its modest appearance, one particular factor keeps this place bustling. The server, a young woman named Lena. At just 22 years old, Lena has been working at the restaurant since high school. Her job is not easy, serving hurried customers and sometimes enduring unpleasant demands from people rushing through their lives. Yet, Lena always maintains a friendly and dedicated attitude. On a day like any other, Lena stands behind the cash register, her face beaming with a smile and her hands moving swiftly. As customers walk in, she greets them warmly and asks for their orders. Though this restaurant is not the top choice for food enthusiasts, for those in need of a quick and convenient meal, it remains a go-to spot. As Lena prepares food for the customers, she has no idea that something extraordinary is about to happen that afternoon. An event that will not only change that day, but also impact the days and months to come. The restaurant that day maintained its usual rhythm. Customers hurried in and out, the coffee machine hummed in the background, and the staff busied themselves with cleaning. But just as Lena turned around behind the counter to grab more food, a man walked into the restaurant. He was unlike any customer she had encountered in all her years working there. He wore a black leather jacket, old jeans, and sneakers. His dark hair was slightly messy, and his piercing eyes held a depth that was hard to ignore. Keanu Reeves, a name almost everyone knew, had just stepped into this small, fast food restaurant. However, he wasn't here as a famous movie star, but simply as an ordinary man, looking for a quick meal amid the relentless pace of life. Lena didn't recognize him immediately, yet a strange sensation washed over her when his gaze met hers. A peculiar silence filled the air, as if all the surrounding noise had faded, leaving only his presence. Keanu walked up to the counter and Lena greeted him with a smile. She asked what he would like to order, and he responded in a deep, gentle voice, "I'll have a burger with fries and a glass of water." Lena nodded and swiftly got to work. However, she couldn't shake the odd feeling as he stood there, silent, unhurried, unlike the other customers. They didn't exchange many words, yet there was an unexplainable connection between them, a quiet understanding that both could feel. After Lena handed Keanu his food, she returned to her work, but the brief encounter lingered in her mind. She was not an avid fan of movie stars, yet there was something about Keanu that felt familiar, something humble and grounded, a rarity among celebrities. She thought about the movies she had seen, about Keanu's on-screen presence in his roles. However, in this moment, there were no bright stage lights, no cameras rolling. There was only an ordinary man having a quick meal, just like anyone else. The next day, Lena went about her work as usual. Regular customers stopped by, rushed orders were placed, and friends sat chatting over their meals. It was the same familiar rhythm of life she had grown accustomed to. Then, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the restaurant. Lena didn't get a clear look at who stepped out at first. However, she quickly recognized the black leather jacket and the slightly tousled, dark hair. Lena noticed that today, Keanu seemed to prefer not drawing attention to himself. He walked over to a quiet corner of the restaurant, sat down, and gazed out the window. The view outside was simple, and it seemed as though he was searching for a moment of peace amidst the noise of the world around him. Lena continued preparing meals for other customers, but her mind kept drifting back to Keanu. She wondered why someone as famous as him would choose such a modest fast food restaurant. Was he looking for a brief escape from the chaos? Or did he simply want to blend into the everyday life of ordinary people? She didn't know, but she couldn't stop thinking about him. As the restaurant grew quieter, Lena decided to bring Keanu's meal to his table instead of making him come up to the counter. As she approached, Keanu looked up and smiled a soft, warm smile. He thanked her and continued eating. Lena returned to her work, but this time an unexplainable feeling stirred within her. Keanu began to visit the restaurant more often. Each time he came, he chose a table by the window, sitting alone and enjoying his meal in silence. Lena started paying more attention to him. Despite being a star with millions of fans, he seemed to prefer staying out of the spotlight. Unlike other celebrities she had heard about, Keanu never requested special meals, never wore sunglasses indoors, and never hid behind flashy outfits. One day, when the restaurant was nearly empty, Lena was cleaning up when she unintentionally overheard Keanu talking on the phone. He wasn't speaking loudly, but she could tell he was discussing some project challenges at work, difficult decisions he had to make. She didn't know the details of the conversation, but one thing was clear. Despite being a famous star, Keanu also faced struggles and choices that only he could truly understand. A strange feeling washed over Lena. She realized that the celebrities she had seen on screen didn't always live in a world detached from reality. They were just as human as anyone else, with worries and emotions that often remained unseen. And perhaps it was that sense of closeness that made something unspoken but special exist between her and Keanu. As the days passed, the connection between Lena and Keanu, though never explicitly acknowledged, gradually became more familiar. He continued to visit the restaurant, always alone, always choosing a seat by the window, quietly enjoying his meal. Lena was no longer surprised by his presence. She went about her work, serving other customers, but from time to time her eyes would drift toward Keanu, observing him in a moment of quiet solitude. She didn't want to intrude, yet she sometimes found herself wanting to know more about him. Still, she couldn't bring herself to cross the unspoken boundary of silence between them. One day, when the restaurant was fairly quiet, Lena decided to approach Keanu's table. This time, she didn't just bring his food, she lingered a little longer. A strange mix of curiosity and nervousness made it hard for her to look away from him. Keanu looked up at her gently, a fleeting smile, a deep gaze, as if he recognized something in her eyes, but neither of them said a word. They just stood there, looking at each other in a long, silent moment. Then, Lena quickly turned back to her work and Keanu resumed his meal without saying anything else. Although no words were exchanged, Lena felt an invisible connection. She didn't need to understand everything about him, nor did she need to ask big questions. Perhaps, in that moment, they simply shared a sense of peace and quiet understanding without the need for explanations. She wondered if she was just being overly sensitive. She knew that Keanu came here just to eat, like anyone else, but sometimes she couldn't shake the feeling that he was here for something more. Still, she never asked. She didn't want to intrude, nor did she want to disrupt the simplicity of it all. Every time Keanu came in, he ordered the same meal, a burger, fries, and a glass of water. But this time, Lena thought that maybe he came because he found a sense of peace in this small, unassuming place. Perhaps this little fast food restaurant was his escape from the spotlight, the movies, and the prying eyes of the public. She couldn't be certain, but the feeling grew stronger inside her with each passing day. One day, while Lena was preparing meals for customers, she unexpectedly received a call from the restaurant manager. They informed her that the restaurant would be undergoing renovations, with several changes aimed at attracting more customers. Part of the plan included updating the menu, adding new dishes, and transforming the space into a more upscale environment. Lena couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. She had grown attached to the restaurant's simple, unpretentious atmosphere, but now it seemed like everything was about to change. The place would become more modern, and perhaps it would no longer hold the same warmth and familiarity it once did. When Keanu arrived that afternoon, Lena sensed a shift in the air. He took his usual seat by the window, but something felt different. Today, he seemed more pensive, as if he too could sense that things were changing, even if it was just a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Lena brought his food to him, but this time she lingered a little longer. Keanu looked up and smiled, but this time there was a hint of sadness in his expression. Day by day, the changes in the restaurant became more noticeable. The space had been revamped with new chairs, light-colored wooden tables, and sleek, modern lighting. Lena could feel the shift not just in the decor, but in the overall atmosphere. The regular customers still came, but the warmth the place once had seemed to be fading. Keanu continued to visit regularly. Neither of them made an effort to break the silence, yet both were aware of each other's presence. One afternoon, when the restaurant was quiet, Lena decided to approach Keanu's table, even though she knew this time might not be any different from before. She placed his meal in front of him and stood there for a moment, not leaving as quickly as she usually did. Keanu looked up at her, and instead of lowering his gaze to continue eating as he normally would, he paused and met her eyes with a deep, searching look. In that moment, Lena felt that there was something unspoken between them, a feeling she couldn't quite put into words. Keanu gave a gentle smile and softly said, "This place has changed, hasn't it?" A simple question, yet it carried an indescribable sadness. Lena didn't know how to respond. She simply nodded, acknowledging that change was inevitable. But she couldn't stop thinking about all the things that had remained unsaid between them. A few weeks passed, and Keanu still continued to visit the restaurant. However, unlike before, he began to change his routine. He arrived later, choosing to sit in the quieter corners where no one would recognize him. The sense of peace and comfort he once found in this place seemed to be slipping away. Lena noticed this, and a quiet unease settled in her heart. Did he still want to come here? Did he feel like he no longer belonged to this place? The one that had once given him a small refuge from the noise of the world? One day, as Keanu stepped into the restaurant, Lena saw him through the glass door, a quiet figure moving through the golden hues of the setting sun. He looked around for a moment before taking his usual seat. Lena knew that this might be the last time he came here, and a strange feeling washed over her. She didn't want him to leave. She didn't want to lose this small, quiet part of their unspoken connection. But she also understood that, like everything in life, these moments wouldn't last forever. This time, instead of staying silent like before, Lena made a decision. She walked over to Keanu's table, sat down across from him, and started a conversation. She didn't know where to begin, but at the very least, she could finally ask the one question she had been wondering about for so long. Why did you choose to come here? What is it about this place that makes it special to you? Keanu looked at her for a long moment as if carefully considering her question. Finally, he answered, his voice deep and gentle. Maybe it's because here I feel like an ordinary person. No crowds, no attention, just me and a meal. Sometimes that's all I need. His response made Lena feel at ease. It wasn't necessarily the answer she had expected, but at least now she understood. What they had shared, even in moments of silence, had mattered more than she realized. As time passed, the restaurant was no longer the place where they frequently saw each other. But the memories of those quiet moments remained deeply etched in her heart. Keanu no longer came to the restaurant, and Lena no longer saw him during the slower hours of the day. But the glances they had exchanged, the quiet smiles, were now a cherished part of her memories. There had been no goodbyes, no promises. Yet Lena knew that something within her had changed. And those simple moments, those unexpected encounters, would always be part of the journey they had shared, even as life led them down separate paths.